The morning sun shone through the large glass windows of Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. The place was busy as always. Hundreds of people rushed in all directions. Some dragged heavy suitcases. Others stared at their phones. All of them were in a hurry to get somewhere. Officer James Riley stood near the entrance of Terminal 3. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern face. His police uniform was neat and pressed. The shiny badge on his chest caught the light as he moved. James had worked at the airport for 8 years. Before that, he had been a street cop in downtown Chicago for 7 years. He thought he knew trouble when he saw it. James watched the crowds with careful eyes. He liked to think he could spot a bad person before they did something wrong. His boss often praised him for being alert, but some of his fellow officers whispered that James was too quick to stop people who didn't look like him. Another day, another dollar, James said to himself as he scanned the faces in the crowd. That's when he spotted a man who caught his attention. The man was in his 50s, with brown skin and black hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore an expensive dark blue suit and carried a small leather bag. The man was walking fast and checking his watch every few seconds. Something about the man made James suspicious. He couldn't say exactly what it was. Maybe it was how fast the man was walking. Maybe it was the way he kept looking around. Or maybe it was something else entirely. What James didn't know was that the man was Rajiv Sharma, the new chairman of Global Airways. Global Airways was the biggest airline company in the world. It had more than 200 planes and flew to 190 countries. Rajiv had just been named chairman 3 months ago. Before that, he had been the chief financial officer for 5 years. Rajiv was in a rush because his flight from London had landed late. He was supposed to meet his executive team in 30 minutes for an important meeting. They were going to talk about buying a smaller airline company. If the deal went through, Global Airways would grow even bigger. Just my luck, Rajiv muttered as he rushed through the terminal. His assistant had sent his suit to the airport, and he had changed in the bathroom after his flight landed. Now he needed to get to the VIP lounge where his team was waiting. James decided to stop the man. He stepped into Rajiv's path, blocking him. "Excuse me, sir, can I see some ID?" James asked. His voice was firm and cold. Rajiv stopped, surprised. "Of course, officer," he said politely. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine," James said. He didn't smile. "You seem to be in quite a hurry." "Yes, I am," Rajiv said. "I have an important meeting in less than 30 minutes. I'm already late because my flight was delayed." He handed over his ID and his Global Airways credentials. James looked at the ID. The name Rajiv Sharma didn't mean anything to him. He glanced at the Global Airways card that showed Rajiv was the chairman, but he didn't seem impressed. "Could you step over here, sir?" James pointed to a quieter area away from the main flow of people. Rajiv's face showed confusion. "Officer, I really don't have time for this. As you can see from my credentials, I'm the chairman of Global Airways. This is our hub airport. You can call our security team if you need to verify who I am." James didn't like Rajiv's tone. In his mind, the man was being difficult. "Sir, I need you to step aside now," he said more firmly. People walking by started to slow down. Some stopped to watch what was happening. A few took out their phones and began recording. "This is ridiculous," Rajiv said. He reached for his phone. "I'm going to call my assistant to bring someone from our airport team here." James saw Rajiv reach into his pocket and reacted instantly. He grabbed Rajiv's arm and pushed him against the wall. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "What are you doing?" Rajiv asked, his voice rising in shock. "I was just getting my phone." James didn't listen. He pulled Rajiv's arms behind his back and clicked handcuffs around his wrists. "You need to stop resisting," he said loudly. "I'm not resisting," Rajiv protested. "This is outrageous. I'm the chairman of the airline." By now a crowd had gathered. Dozens of phones were recording the scene. A young woman in an airport uniform rushed forward. "Officer, that's Mr. Sharma," she said urgently. "He's the chairman of Global Airways." James ignored her. "Sir, I'm taking you to the security office for questioning," he said to Rajiv. Across the airport in the VIP lounge, Jessica Chen checked her watch again. As the chief operating officer of Global Airways, she ran the day-to-day business of the company. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had worked her way up from being a flight attendant 20 years ago. "He's still not here," she said to the group of executives sitting around the large table. "This isn't like Rajiv at all." "Mark," Wilson, the chief marketing officer, nodded. "Should we try calling him again?" Just then, Jessica's phone rang. It was Rajiv's assistant, Priya. "Ms. Chen, we have a problem," Priya said, her voice shaking. "Mr. Sharma has been detained by airport police. He's been handcuffed." "What?" Jessica stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "That's impossible. People are recording it. It's already on social media," Priya said. "What should we do?" Jessica's mind raced. "Call Marcus Williams immediately," she told Priya. Marcus was the head of security for Global Airways. He had worked for the FBI before joining the company. "Tell him to get to wherever they're holding Rajiv right now, and get our legal team on standby." She turned to the confused executives. "Rajiv has been detained by airport police. I don't have details yet, but we need to act fast. This could become a PR nightmare." Back at the security office, James had seated Rajiv in a small room. The handcuffs were still on, digging into Rajiv's wrists. "Officer, this is a huge mistake," Rajiv said calmly. "If you just check with the airline staff, they will confirm who I am." James stood with his arms crossed. "Sir, you were acting suspiciously. You tried to reach for something when I asked you to step aside. I'm following protocol." "I was reaching for my phone," Rajiv explained for the third time, "to call my team." A knock came at the door, and another police officer stepped in. He whispered something to James. James's face changed as he listened. The other officer left, and James turned back to Rajiv. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "Sir, it appears there may have been a misunderstanding." Rajiv's face was calm, but his eyes were cold. "Yes, officer, a serious misunderstanding that many people recorded on their phones. A misunderstanding that is probably all over the internet by now." Before James could respond, the door opened again. A tall black man in a perfectly tailored suit walked in. It was Marcus Williams, Global Airways head of security. His face was like stone as he took in the scene. Rajiv Sharma, the chairman of the largest airline in the world, sitting handcuffed in a small airport security room. "Remove those handcuffs immediately," Marcus demanded, his deep voice filling the small room. He held up his credentials. "Marcus Williams, Global Airways head of security. I've already spoken to your captain. This man is Rajiv Sharma, chairman of Global Airways." James hesitated for a moment, then took out his keys and removed the handcuffs from Rajiv's wrists. Rajiv rubbed his sore wrists but didn't say anything. "Mr. Sharma, I apologize for the confusion," James said stiffly. "Confusion?" Marcus cut in. "This wasn't confusion. This was profiling, plain and simple." Rajiv stood up and straightened his suit jacket. "We'll discuss this another time," he said quietly. "Right now I have a meeting to attend." He turned to Marcus. "How bad is it?" Marcus showed him his phone. On the screen was a video of Rajiv being handcuffed. It already had 50,000 views. The hashtag #DyeRFlyingWhileBrown was trending. "It's just the beginning," Marcus said grimly. As they walked out, Rajiv looked back at Officer James Riley. "This isn't over," he said simply. James stood alone in the room, a cold feeling spreading in his stomach. He had a bad feeling that Rajiv Sharma was right. This was far from over. Marcus Williams walked quickly through the airport terminal with Rajiv Sharma at his side. People stared as they passed. Some held up phones, still recording. News traveled fast in the age of social media. "The executive team is waiting in the VIP lounge," Marcus said. "Jessica called a few minutes ago. Everyone is worried." Rajiv nodded but said nothing. His face was calm, but Marcus could see anger in his eyes. Rajiv had worked hard all his life to reach his position. He had faced discrimination before, but never so publicly, never so humiliating. When they reached the VIP lounge, Jessica Chen rushed to meet them. Rajiv, are you okay? What happened out there? The other executives gathered around, their faces showing shock and concern. Rajiv raised his hand to quiet them. I'm fine, he said. Just a misunderstanding with airport security. We have more important things to discuss. He looked at his watch. We've already lost 40 minutes, let's get to work. Jessica looked like she wanted to say more, but she respected Rajiv's wish to focus on business. Of course, let's start the meeting. For the next 2 hours, they discussed the planned purchase of Skywing Airlines, a smaller company that would help Global Airways expand in Asia. Rajiv led the meeting as if nothing had happened. His mind was clear, his questions sharp. But occasionally, he would rub his wrists where the handcuffs had been. Meanwhile, Officer James Riley sat in his supervisor's office. Captain Lisa Monroe was not happy. Do you have any idea what you've done? She asked, her voice tight with anger. She turned her computer screen to show him. Videos of Rajiv's arrest were spreading online like wildfire. News websites were already posting stories. I was following protocol, James said. He was acting suspicious. Suspicious how? Captain Monroe asked. By walking quickly, by checking his watch. Do you know how many people do that in an airport every day? James shifted in his seat. He reached for something when I asked him to step aside. His phone, Captain Monroe said flatly. He was reaching for his phone, which he told you he was doing. I couldn't know that for sure, James argued. Captain Monroe sighed and rubbed her forehead. James, this is the third complaint about you targeting minorities in the last year. The difference is, this time you handcuffed the chairman of the largest airline in the world and it's all over the internet. I didn't know who he was, James said. That's the problem. Captain Monroe's voice rose. You didn't bother to really check his ID. You saw a brown man in a hurry and decided he was suspicious. That's called profiling, James. That's not fair, James protested. I'm not racist. I stop all kinds of people. Save it, Captain Monroe said. Internal Affairs wants to see you tomorrow morning. Until then, you're on paid leave. Hand over your badge and gun. James stared at her in disbelief. You're suspending me for doing my job? For not doing your job properly, she corrected him. Now badge and gun. On my desk. With stiff movements, James removed his badge and his gun and placed them on the desk. Without another word, he turned and left the office. As he walked through the airport in just his uniform without his badge and gun, James felt naked. Other officers looked at him, some with pity, others with disapproval. Word had spread fast. Outside the airport, James found a group of reporters waiting. They rushed toward him, shouting questions. Officer Riley, why did you handcuff Rajiv Sharma? Was it racial profiling, Officer Riley? Have you been suspended? James pushed past them without answering. He got into his car and slammed the door. As he drove away, his phone rang. It was his wife, Karen. James, have you seen the news? She asked, her voice worried. You're all over it. They're saying you arrested the chairman of an airline because he's Indian. It wasn't like that, James said. He was acting suspicious. I was doing my job. Oh, James. Karen's voice was sad. Are you coming home? Yeah. I've been suspended until further notice. There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Karen said, We'll figure this out. Just come home. James hung up and kept driving. In his mind, he replayed the incident. Had he really done anything wrong? The man was rushing, looking around nervously. Anyone would have been suspicious. Wouldn't they? Back at Global Airways headquarters, Rajiv had just finished a press conference. Standing beside him were Jessica Chen and the company's head lawyer, David Porter. Global Airways is deeply concerned about the treatment of our chairman, Mr. Rajiv Sharma. At O'Hare International Airport today, Rajiv read from a prepared statement. We believe this incident raises serious questions about racial profiling and the treatment of minorities by airport security. We are conducting our own investigation and will cooperate fully with the authorities. We thank our customers and shareholders for their support during this time. As reporters shouted questions, David stepped forward. Mr. Sharma will not be taking questions at this time. We will provide updates as our investigation continues. Thank you. They left the press room and went to Rajiv's office. Once inside, Rajiv loosened his tie and sat down heavily in his chair. You did well out there, Jessica said. Very professional. I've had practice, Rajiv said with a hint of bitterness. This isn't the first time I've been treated like a criminal because of how I look. It's just the first time it's been caught on camera for the world to see. David Porter checked his phone. The Chicago Police Department has issued a statement. They've suspended the officer pending an investigation and apologized for the incident. Not good enough, Jessica said firmly. We need to push for more. This can't happen again to anyone. Rajiv looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. You're right, but let's be smart about how we handle this. I don't want to destroy this officer's life. I want real change. What do you have in mind? David asked. I'm not sure yet, Rajiv admitted. But this is a chance to address a bigger problem. Let me think about it overnight. Across town, James Riley sat in his living room watching the news. His face was on the screen. The reporter was saying, sources within the Chicago Police Department suggest Officer Riley has had previous complaints about racial profiling. The officer has been suspended pending an investigation. Karen sat beside him, holding his hand. It will be okay, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. James's phone rang. It was his union representative. James, we need to talk about tomorrow's meeting with Internal Affairs. This is serious. There's video evidence and the department is under a lot of pressure. Are they going to fire me? James asked bluntly. There was a pause. It's possible. The case against you is strong. And with all the media attention, I get it, James said. They need someone to blame. That's not what I said, the union rep replied. Look, just be honest tomorrow. Admit if you made mistakes. Show that you understand the seriousness of the situation. After hanging up, James sat in silence. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Had he been wrong? Would he have stopped a white man who was rushing through the airport? He wasn't sure anymore. Meanwhile, at his luxury apartment, Rajiv sat on his balcony with a glass of scotch. His phone kept ringing with calls from friends, family, and business associates. Messages of support poured in. One message caught his attention. It was from his old mentor, Professor Alan Wong from Harvard Business School. Rajiv, terrible what happened today. But remember what I taught you. Great leaders turn problems into opportunities. This is your chance to make a difference beyond the boardroom. Rajiv smiled slightly. Professor Wong was right. This was an opportunity. Not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been unfairly judged based on their appearance. He picked up his phone and called Jessica. I know what we're going to do, he said. It's time to turn this incident into something positive. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Every major news channel talked about Rajiv Sharma and Officer James Riley. The videos of Rajiv being handcuffed had been viewed millions of times. People all over the world were sharing their own stories of being unfairly treated because of how they looked. James Riley sat in a small waiting room at police headquarters. He wore a suit instead of his uniform. In 30 minutes, he would face the Internal Affairs team. His union representative, Mike Donovan, sat beside him reviewing notes. Remember what we discussed, Mike said. Be honest but respectful. Don't get defensive. Show that you understand the seriousness of the situation. James nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Last night he had barely slept. He kept seeing Rajiv Sharma's face, the mix of surprise and anger when the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. For the first time in his 15 years as a police officer, James wondered if he had been wrong. Officer Riley? A woman in a dark suit stood at the door. They're ready for you. James stood and straightened his tie. Here we go, he said to Mike. They walked into a conference room where three serious-faced people sat behind a long table. James recognized Chief Roberts, the head of the Chicago Police Department. Next to him sat Maria Lopez from Internal Affairs and John Williams from the Civilian Oversight Board. Officer Riley, Chief Roberts began, you know why you're here. Yesterday's incident at O'Hare Airport has raised serious concerns about your judgment. and possible bias in performing your duties. For the next hour, they questioned James about every detail of the incident. Why did he stop Rajiv? What made him suspicious? Did he properly check Rajiv's ID? Why did he use handcuffs? Had he received training about racial profiling? James tried to explain his actions, but with each question he felt less sure of himself. The truth was he couldn't clearly say why Rajiv had seemed suspicious. He had just had a feeling. "Officer Riley," Maria Lopez said, looking at a file in front of her, "this is not the first complaint about you. In the past 2 years, you've had 3 other complaints from minority travelers who said you targeted them unfairly. Those complaints were dismissed," James pointed out. "Yes," Maria agreed, "but patterns matter. We've reviewed your arrest records. Do you know what percentage of the people you've stopped at the airport are minorities?" James shook his head. 78%, Maria said. "In an airport where minorities make up about 30% of travelers." James felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Was that true? He had never counted. Across town at Global Airways headquarters, Rajiv sat with his executive team and a group of community leaders. They included Reverend Michael Johnson, a respected civil rights leader, Dr. Sarah Patel, a professor of social justice, and Congressman David Liu, who had long fought for equality in law enforcement. "Thank you all for coming," Rajiv said. "As you know, yesterday, I was wrongfully detained at O'Hare Airport. While this was personally humiliating, I realize it's also an opportunity to address a bigger problem. You have our full support," Reverend Johnson said. "What happened to you happens to people of color every day. The difference is, most don't have your platform to speak out." Jessica Chen passed out folders to everyone. "We've prepared a proposal," she explained. "Global Airways wants to partner with the Chicago Police Department to create a new training program. We'll fund it completely." Dr. Patel opened her folder and read through the proposal. "This is impressive," she said. "De-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity training, community feedback sessions. This could make a real difference. We also want to create a scholarship program," Rajiv added, "for minority students who want to pursue careers in law enforcement. We need to change the system from within." Congressman Liu nodded approvingly. "This is exactly the kind of positive response we need, not just anger, but action that leads to real change." As they continued to discuss the details, Rajiv's assistant knocked and entered the room. "Mr. Sharma, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. The Chicago Police Department is holding a press conference right now about Officer Riley." Rajiv picked up a remote and turned on the large TV on the wall. Chief Roberts was standing at a podium facing a crowd of reporters. "After a thorough review of all evidence," the chief was saying, "including body camera footage and witness statements, we have determined that Officer James Riley violated multiple department policies in his treatment of Mr. Rajiv Sharma. His actions showed poor judgment and a failure to follow proper procedures." The room fell silent as everyone watched. "Effective immediately," Chief Roberts continued, "Officer Riley's employment with the Chicago Police Department has been terminated." Reporters shouted questions all at once. Chief Roberts raised his hands for quiet. "This decision was not made lightly," he said, "but the evidence was clear. We cannot tolerate any actions by our officers that undermine public trust, especially actions that appear to be motivated by bias." Rajiv turned off the TV and looked around the room. Everyone was watching him, waiting for his reaction. "They fired him," Reverend Johnson said. "That's a strong message." Rajiv nodded slowly. "Yes, it is. But firing one officer doesn't solve the larger problem. We need to move forward with our plan." Back at police headquarters, James sat in shock. Fired. After 15 years on the force, it was over. His career, his identity, gone in an instant. "We can appeal," Mike, his union rep, was saying. "It might take time, but we can fight this." James barely heard him. He was thinking about what would happen next. How would he pay his mortgage? What would he tell his parents? His friends? Would he ever work in law enforcement again? Outside the building, reporters waited. When James and Mike came out, cameras flashed and questions flew at them from all directions. Officer Riley, what's your response to being fired? Do you think the decision was fair? Will you apologize to Mr. Sharma? Mike stepped in front of James. My client has no comment at this time. We will be reviewing all options, including a possible appeal. They pushed through the crowd to Mike's car. Once inside, James let out a long breath. What do I do now? He asked, more to himself than to Mike. Go home, Mike advised. Be with your family. Stay away from social media and the news. Let me handle the press. When James got home, Karen was waiting. She hugged him tightly. I heard, she said. I'm so sorry. James hugged her back, feeling numb. I messed up, Karen. I really messed up. Everyone makes mistakes, she said gently. Not mistakes that end up on the national news, James said bitterly. Not mistakes that cost them their careers. They went inside and James saw their two teenage children, Emma and Tyler, watching him with uncertain eyes. How could he explain to them what had happened? That their father had been fired for treating someone unfairly because of how they looked. Dad? Emma said hesitantly. Are you okay? James tried to smile. I'll be fine. Honey, it's just going to be a tough time for a while. That evening, Rajiv held another press conference. This time, he stood with Chief Roberts, Reverend Johnson, and the other community leaders. Today, the Chicago Police Department took decisive action. Rajiv began. While I take no joy in Officer Riley losing his job, I believe accountability is important. However, this cannot be the end of the story. He explained the new training program and scholarship fund that Global Airways would create. He talked about the need for understanding and education, not just punishment. What happened to me was unfortunate, Rajiv said. But if we can use this incident to create positive change, then something good will have come from it. As Rajiv spoke, James watched on his living room TV. It was strange to see this man he had handcuffed now talking about making things better, not angry or seeking revenge, but looking for solutions. James turned off the TV and looked at his family. I need to make this right, he said. Somehow I need to make this right. A week passed. The story of Rajiv Sharma and James Riley was still in the news, but it had moved from the front page to the inside sections. New problems and scandals had taken its place in the headlines. But for the two men at the center of the story, life had changed completely. James Riley sat at his kitchen table staring at his laptop. He was looking at job listings, but nothing seemed right. 15 years as a police officer hadn't prepared him for much else. He had applied to a few security companies, but no one had called him back. His name and face were too well known now. Any luck? Karen asked as she brought him a cup of coffee. James shook his head. Nothing yet. I might have to look outside of Chicago. The idea of leaving the city where they had built their life was painful. Their house, their friends, their children's schools, everything was here. But James was beginning to think they might not have a choice. His phone rang. It was Mike Donovan, his union representative. James, we got a response from the department about your appeal, Mike said. They're not changing their decision. I'm sorry. James had expected this, but it still hurt. Thanks for trying, Mike, he said. There's something else, Mike continued. Global Airways has filed a lawsuit against you and the department. They're claiming civil rights violations and seeking damages. James closed his eyes. It just kept getting worse. How much? They haven't specified an amount, Mike said. But given who Rajiv Sharma is, it could be substantial. After hanging up, James put his head in his hands. A lawsuit would drain what little savings they had. They might lose the house, his children's. College funds would be gone. Bad news? Karen asked softly. The worst, James replied. Global Airways is suing me. Across town at Global Airways headquarters, Rajiv was in a meeting with David Porter, the company's lawyer. The lawsuit is proceeding as planned, David reported. The department has already indicated they want to settle. As for Officer Riley, personally, that's your call. Rajiv looked out the window. The lawsuit had been Jessica's idea, a way to show they were serious about accountability. But Rajiv wasn't comfortable with it. Suing the department made sense. They needed to change their policies. But suing James Riley personally felt like revenge, not justice. "I want to drop the personal lawsuit against Officer Riley," Rajiv said suddenly. David looked surprised. "Are you sure? We have a very strong case." "I'm sure," Rajiv said firmly. "The man has lost his job and his reputation. Taking his house won't solve anything. Let's focus on the department." David made a note. "As you wish. What about the training program? Are we ready to announce the details?" Rajiv nodded. "Almost. There's one more thing I want to add." Later that afternoon, James's doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see two men in suits standing there. "Mr. Riley?" one of them asked. "I'm Marcus Williams, head of security for Global Airways. This is my colleague, Robert Chen. May we come in?" James hesitated, then stepped back to let them in. His mind raced. Was this about the lawsuit? Were they here to serve him papers? They sat in the living room. Karen joined them, looking nervous. "I'll get right to the point," Marcus said. "Mr. Sharma has decided to drop the personal lawsuit against you." James and Karen exchanged surprised looks. "He has? Why?" James asked. "He believes that losing your job was punishment enough," Marcus explained. "He doesn't want to destroy your life. He wants to create change." James felt a mix of relief and shame. After everything he had done, Rajiv Sharma was showing him mercy. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Global Airways is launching a new training program for police officers, focusing on bias awareness and de-escalation techniques. We're working with experts in the field, community leaders, and the police department." "That's good," James said, not sure where this was going. "We want you to be part of it," Marcus said. James stared at him. "Me? Why would you want me involved?" "Because you've lived it," Robert Chen explained. "You made mistakes based on bias, and you faced consequences. Your perspective could be valuable. You could help other officers understand how bias affects decision-making, even when they don't realize it." James couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want me to work for Global Airways, the company I almost got sued by, the company whose chairman I handcuffed?" Marcus smiled slightly. "It was Mr. Sharma's idea. He believes in second chances, and in learning from mistakes." Karen reached over and squeezed James's hand. "It's an opportunity, James." James looked down at their joined hands. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," Marcus advised. "Think about it. We're holding a meeting tomorrow at our headquarters to discuss the program. Come and listen, then decide." After they left, James sat in silence for a long time. Karen waited patiently. "What are you thinking?" she finally asked. "I'm thinking it's either the most generous offer I've ever heard or some kind of trick," James said honestly. "Do you really think it's a trick?" Karen asked. James thought about Rajiv's press conference, how he had talked about creating positive change instead of seeking revenge. "No," he admitted. "I don't think it's a trick. I just don't understand why he would give me a second chance." The next day, James put on his best suit and drove to Global Airways headquarters. The tall glass building in downtown Chicago reflected the morning sun. James felt small as he walked through the grand entrance. The security guard checked his ID and directed him to a conference room on the 30th floor. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus was waiting for him. "I'm glad you came," he said, leading James down a hallway. The conference room was already full of people. James recognized some of them: Reverend Johnson, Dr. Patel, Congressman Liu. There were also several police officers, including Captain Monroe, his former supervisor. At the head of the table sat Rajiv Sharma, talking quietly with Jessica Chen. When James entered, the room fell silent. Rajiv stood and walked toward James. Everyone watched, wondering what would happen when the two men faced each other for the first time since the incident. Rajiv extended his hand. "Mr. Riley, thank you for coming." After a moment's hesitation, James shook his hand. "Thank you for inviting me, and for dropping the lawsuit." "Please have a seat," Rajiv said, gesturing to an empty chair. For the next hour, they discussed the YAMB training program. Experts explained their approaches. Police officers shared their concerns. Community leaders talked about their experiences with law enforcement. Throughout it all, James sat quietly, listening and taking notes. Finally, Rajiv turned to him. "Mr. Riley, we've all shared our thoughts. I'd like to hear yours. Do you think a program like this could make a difference?" All eyes turned to James. He cleared his throat. "A month ago, I would have said no. I would have said I don't have biases, that I treat everyone the same, but now—" He paused, gathering his courage. "Now I know that's not true. I did profile Mr. Sharma. I did make assumptions based on how he looked, and I never would have realized it if I hadn't lost my job over it." The room was silent as James continued. "So yes, I think this program could help, but only if officers are willing to be honest with themselves. And that's the hardest part." Rajiv nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty. That's exactly why we want you involved. You've learned the lesson the hard way. You can help others learn it without going through what you did." After the meeting, Rajiv asked James to stay behind. When everyone else had left, the two men sat across from each other. "I want to apologize," James said. "What I did to you was wrong. I'm truly sorry." "I accept your apology," Rajiv said simply. "Now, what matters is what comes next. Will you help us with this program?" James looked at Rajiv with new respect. This man had every reason to hate him, to want to see him suffer. Instead, he was offering him a way to make amends. "Yes," James said. "I'll help in any way I can." As James left the building, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: hope. His life had fallen apart because of one bad decision, one moment of bias. But maybe, just maybe, he could help prevent others from making the same mistake. 6 months had passed since the day Officer James Riley handcuffed Rajiv Sharma at O'Hare Airport. The summer heat had given way to fall colors, and now winter was approaching. Chicago prepared for snow as the city moved on from the scandal that had once filled the headlines. But the story wasn't over. In fact, its most important chapter was just beginning. A large crowd gathered in the main hall of O'Hare International Airport's Terminal 3, the same terminal where the incident had taken place. Police officers stood alongside community leaders, airline staff, and city officials. TV cameras and reporters lined the back of the room. At exactly 10 a.m., Rajiv Sharma walked onto the small stage that had been set up. He was followed by Chief Roberts of the Chicago Police Department, Mayor Wilson, and, surprisingly to many, James Riley. "Good morning," Rajiv began, speaking into the microphone. "6 months ago, in this very terminal, I was wrongfully handcuffed
and detained. It was a humiliating experience, one that reminded me and many others who saw the videos that prejudice and bias are still very real problems in our society." The crowd was silent, many remembering the shocking footage that had
gone viral. Today, I'm proud to announce that something positive has come from that negative experience. Global Airways and the Chicago Police Department are launching the Respect and Recognition Program, a comprehensive training initiative designed to help officers recognize and overcome unconscious bias. Chief Roberts stepped forward. "This program will be mandatory for all officers working in transportation hubs throughout the city. It's already being implemented at O'Hare and Midway airports, and we plan to expand it to train stations and bus terminals in the coming months." Mayor Wilson spoke next, praising the collaboration between Global Airways and the police department. She emphasized the city's commitment to treating all visitors and residents with respect and dignity. Then it was James Riley's turn to speak. He looked different now, older in some ways, but also more at peace. He wore a dark suit with a Global Airways pin on his lapel. As he approached the microphone, a hush fell over the crowd. Many were curious about what the man at the center of the scandal would say. "My name is James Riley," he began, his voice slightly nervous but clear. 6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake. I saw a man rushing through this airport, and I made assumptions based on how he looked. Those assumptions were wrong. My actions were wrong." James paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I lost my job as a police officer and I deserved to lose it. But thanks to Mr. Sharma's incredible generosity, I didn't lose my chance to make things right. For the past 5 months, I've been working with a team at Global Airways to develop this training program. I've shared my story, my mistakes, with hundreds of officers. James looked around the room, making eye contact with some of the officers present. The hardest thing to admit is that I didn't think I was biased. I thought I treated everyone the same. But when I looked honestly at my record, at who I chose to stop, who I chose to question, the pattern was clear. I just hadn't wanted to see it. A few officers in the audience nodded, recognizing their own struggles in James's words. This program isn't about making anyone feel guilty, James continued. It's about awareness. It's about pausing before we act on our first impressions. It's about making sure what happened to Mr. Sharma doesn't happen to anyone else. After the speeches, Rajiv and James unveiled a plaque that would hang in the terminal. It read, "Dedicated to learning from our mistakes and building a community of respect for all people." As the crowd began to disperse, reporters surrounded Rajiv and James, asking questions about their unusual partnership. "Mr. Sharma, did you ever imagine you would be working with the officer who handcuffed you?" one reporter asked. Rajiv smiled. "Life takes unexpected turns. When we choose growth over anger, wonderful things can happen." "And Mr. Riley, how does it feel to work for the man you once detained?" another reporter asked. "Humbling," James said. "Honestly, but also inspiring. Mr. Sharma could have crushed me with lawsuits. Instead, he offered me a chance to help fix the system. I'll be grateful for that forever." Later that day, Rajiv invited James and his family to dinner at his home. It was the first time their families had met. Karen and the children had been nervous, but Rajiv's warmth quickly put them at ease. As they sat around Rajiv's dining table, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about their children, their hopes for the program, and the changes they'd seen already. "The feedback from officers has been mostly positive," James said. "Some resist at first, but when they see the data, when they see their own patterns, most come around. And the scholarship program is doing well too," Rajiv added. "We've already awarded 15 scholarships to minority students pursuing careers in law enforcement. Change is happening from multiple directions." After dinner, while their spouses chatted and the children played video games, Rajiv led James out onto the balcony of his downtown apartment. The Chicago skyline glittered around them, lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in the distance. "I have some news," Rajiv said. "Global Airways is expanding the program nationally. We want to take it to airports across the country." James looked surprised. "That's fantastic, but it's a huge undertaking." "Yes," Rajiv agreed, "which is why I need someone to lead it, someone who understands both law enforcement and the program. From the inside, someone like you, James." James stared at Rajiv, stunned. "Me? Lead the national program?" "Yes. It would mean traveling to different cities, working with police departments across the country. It's a big job, but I think you're the right person for it." James leaned against the balcony railing, overwhelmed by the offer. 6 months ago, he had been a disgraced ex-cop with no future. Now he was being offered the chance to make a real difference on a national scale. "Why me?" he asked finally. "There must be people more qualified." "Perhaps," Rajiv acknowledged. "But your story is powerful. You've been on both sides. The officer who acted on bias and the man who recognized his mistakes and worked to change. That journey gives you credibility with officers that no expert can match." James thought about it. The job would be challenging. Some departments would resist. Some officers would be hostile. But if he could help prevent even one incident like what happened with Rajiv, wouldn't it be worth it? "I'd be honored," James said at last. "Thank you for believing in me." Rajiv smiled and extended his hand. "Thank you for proving my belief was not misplaced." As they shook hands, both men reflected on the strange path that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, they had been adversaries, a powerful executive wrongfully detained and the officer who had handcuffed him. Now they were partners in creating change. The next day, as James packed for his first trip to Los Angeles, where the program would launch next, He came across an old newspaper with his face on the front page. The headline read, "Prejudiced Cop Fired for Handcuffing Chairman of Biggest Airline." James didn't throw the paper away. Instead, he carefully folded it and placed it in his briefcase. It was a reminder of where he had been and how far he had come. It was the beginning of his story, but not the end. As his plane took off from O'Hare, the very airport where everything had changed, James looked down at the city growing smaller below. His mistake had cost him his job, but it had given him something more valuable: a second chance, a new purpose, and an unexpected friendship that was changing lives across the country. Sometimes, James reflected, the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best if we have the courage to learn and grow from them.